Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Normal Island Live. How do you know I'm hosting today? Because we are late. And I am joined by the wonderful Callum. How's it going?
It's not so bad. I'm all right, actually. I think that we just need to start setting a new time. There was some talk recently that people in cabinet were talking about I think it was KMT, where they were talking about Kemi Mean Time because Kemi Badenoch, sorry, in the shadow cabinet, is always showing up late for meetings. I think we need a LMT, Lewis Mean Time, for when you're hosting.
Have you just compared me to Kemi Badenoch? Is that what you
No,
just?
I may have done. Sorry, I'm in the naughty corner already. No, I'm all right. How are you though? Are you well?
Yeah, not bad. Struggling as always to keep up with the news. There's so much going on, so many things to talk about, so many things to cover. Took a little break the other day because I feel like you have to do that sometimes. Just kind of like step away a little bit and not
Was
immerse
that when you
yourself too.
were? Was that break when you were deep diving at 3 o'clock in the morning, or was that a different time?
Oh, I've done that for the last 2 nights. Like, we've got a WhatsApp group, and I'll just randomly send people links to random things at, like, 4 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. I'm just, like, completely, "Oh, look at this amazing article that I found. That's really interesting." But yeah, that's probably part of the problem as well. I should probably get to bed a little bit earlier. But anyway, let's quickly move on to the first story. We've got 3 stories today. We're going to go through Keir Starmer in Washington with Donald Trump. We're going to talk about the aid cuts to fund the defense. And we're going to go through the House of Lords scandal, which really hasn't kind of got that much coverage. And then we're going to talk about a story that I don't like to give these people attention, but I think it's important to talk about. We're going to talk about the Tate brothers who have just landed in Florida today. But just to quickly go through the first story. So, Keir Starmer, as we've all seen on the news, is in the US to meet the former leader of the free world, Donald Trump, who has recently expressed his desire to take over Greenland, make Canada the 51st state, and even this week posted a disturbing AI video showing a transformed Gaza with Trump hotels and a golden Trump statue standing tall in the sky. A weird marketing technique to cover up genocide and ethnic cleansing. But the idea of this visit is to try and rein in Trump, to get him to stay in NATO, create security for the future of Ukraine and Europe, and absolutely nothing about the descent into fascism, the promotion of ethnic cleansing, and all the threats that he has been giving over to our allies. So, to cozy up to Trump, Keir Starmer is now cutting foreign aid to help pay for increased defense spending. But despite the fact that this will arguably cause more harm further down the line, affecting people who are most vulnerable in the world, it's again frustrating, but we'll get into that. Trump has also been formally invited for a state visit by the king, but the date is yet to be properly determined unless it's been announced recently. I don't know, over the last hour or so. There's so much news coming out. But we will hopefully see you all at the protest with the giant floating naked Donald Trump baby, if everybody remembers that from 2019. Trump then claimed he also had a very good relationship with the Ukrainian leader when they started talking about Ukraine, and said it maybe got a little bit testy because we wanted to have a little bit of what the European nations had. You know, they get their money, the money that they're giving, they're getting it back. We don't get our money back, and Biden made this terrible deal, and he put $350 billion, and I thought it was a very unfair situation, which actually Starmer tried to create his own, Macron moment, which went viral a few days ago, and intervened when Trump said that, saying, "We're not getting all of ours. I mean, it's quite a bit of ours was actually gifted. It was given. There were some loans, and mainly it was mostly gifted." So Keir Starmer claps back. Not really, though. It wasn't really quite the Macron moment that we kind of saw a few days ago. And then, when talking about possible sanctions and tariffs on the UK, we saw some ultimate ass kissing from Keir. He said that I can say we're here for a different reason. We're talking about a very different place. This is some place that I have investment here. I own Turnberry in Aberdeen. I own a great place called Doonbeg in Ireland. So I have a very warm spot for your country. I don't know if Doonbeg is actually is it in Northern Ireland or Ireland? Because obviously Ireland is not part of the UK. I probably should have checked that before. Again, obviously Donald Trump is not the person who's best at the geography, but apparently neither am I. But then
Nor
Keir
me.
Starmer interrupted, saying, "And our trade is obviously fair and balanced, and in fact, you've got a bit of a surplus. Trying to cozy up to Trump." So we're in a different position here. And obviously, we contributed highly to the relation to Ukraine. And then over the next hour, while we're talking right now, there is going to be a continued press conference. So if anything else crazy comes out in the next hour, please in the comments just let us know because we might miss some crazy headlines. Callum, what the fuck?
What the fuck, indeed! It's that press conference is due to start any moment, I think, as well. I'm not sure whether it's actually started, but they're ready to rock and roll. It should have been at 7 o'clock. I was hoping to listen to it on my way home from work, thinking, brilliant, we'll have time. But in true Trump fashion, it's over an hour late. It's it's been a hell of a day. I think there's so much to unpack, but the sort of references to Macron made me laugh because I think you probably saw the scene of Trump being asked whether or not Putin was a dictator in the same way that Zelensky is, according to
Yeah.
Trump, and Macron just sort of laughs almost in disbelief at the fact that that's even a question that a journalist is asking him, and it was such a beautiful, natural moment that just shows the world exactly what people outside of America think of Trump. So yeah, to see Starmer try and sort of be like him with the way he was responding to some of his points today was quite interesting. On the point about Ukraine as well, it, what Macron did and the way that he handled that was so perfect that there was nothing Starmer was really going to be able to do to sort of live up to it. But what really infuriated me, like massively infuriated me, was the groveling around this state visit. The way he pulled out this envelope and sort of was like,
Mm.
aha, look what I have. Feeding into Trump's narcissism. I've got a letter from His Majesty the King directed to you, and Trump sort of, I don't think he was expecting it. He sort of looked across and was like, should I open it? Should I read it? And Stan was like, yes, please. Yeah, read it. Let's tell everyone what's happening, like a little excited schoolboy that's just
Mm.
brought an apple to his teacher. And it just makes me sick. He got a little tap on the shoulder from Starmer. Oh, it's unprecedented, this second state visit. And are we forgetting that this guy has basically threatened to invade Commonwealth countries, allies of ours? Are we forgetting the fact that he's accused Zelensky of, one, being a dictator, and two, starting the war in Ukraine? Are we ignoring the fact that he's trying to extort Ukraine in this plan to strip them of their minerals in offer, in exchange for some sort of peace deal with Russia that Zelensky had no say in? Are we forgetting the fact that this is a convicted felon who has been found liable for sexual abuse and has multiple rape allegations against him? Are we forgetting everything that this man is about? And more importantly, our government have been making a lot of difficult decisions recently regarding taxpayers' money and where cuts need to be made. And I'm very interested to find out what difficult decisions were made in order to pay for a state visit for the likes of Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll put my, practical hat on for a second and pretend I'm a diplomat. So, obviously, many people would say that just because Trump is doing distasteful things and terrible things, that we shouldn't just immediately be like, okay, door closed, because obviously that would cause issues, right? We've got army bases here in the UK, army bases all over Europe. There's things that are tied together. You can't just obviously cut them off. So, I get that side of things. I even get the fact that even if he's making all these weird threats to all these different countries and jokes, again, obviously people need to prepare for them. Absolutely, there has been meetings about it. People are talking about putting troops in Greenland, for God's sake. But ultimately, I get it somewhat, but the point obviously is that obviously I could argue about how terrible obviously what's happened and what's happening in Gaza is terrible, but obviously we're complicit in that too. So I can't even make that moral argument on behalf of the state that we should just simply cut the US off for funding that genocide because we're supporting it too. But ultimately, I feel like it's almost like too risky, right? Like I get trying to keep the alliance going, possibly with the idea of another 4 years, and hopefully things will just go back to normal. But I don't think they ever are. I think, despite the fact that if Trump, absolutely screws over Ukraine, starts putting tariffs on the EU like he said he's going to, maybe puts tariff on us. I just saw a couple of hours ago that there might be tariffs again going back on Canada and Mexico. If he descends down this path, I think our priority should be securing our own future and our future for our allies. And capitulating to him and cozying up to him even further is just so risky because you're tying yourself further to this person. I'm sure in the background they're making plans of, if Trump does this and Trump does that. But ultimately, I think that's where our focus should be right now. Keir Starmer should be spending more time with our European allies and even Canada and other countries, and shoring up those alliances and making sure that Trump can't push everybody around. But because they have this influence and this military power and this global police state that they essentially have, they have so much, and obviously just their trade power as well alone.
Yeah.
Trump is essentially bullying all of these countries, telling them what to do because they are so powerful. And that is risky. And I think it's time to let go of that relationship, even if a perfect president comes into power in 4 years, because it's just too much of a bigger risk.
But that's been put to Starmer as recently as Prime Minister's Questions this week, I think, actually, where other people have said to him, "Look, we need to make sure that we've got strong allies in Europe and that we're not sort of, putting our special relationship with the US ahead of
Mm,
all of that." And his response has basically been, "Oh, well, I hope you're not suggesting that we have to choose between the US or Europe." But when the US are choosing to side with Russia, and they voted in the UN recently with Russia, Belarus, I think Iran. I can't remember what
North
it was
Korea,
on. North Korea.
Eritrea.
But like when the US are literally supporting our so-called, enemies or adversaries or whatever word you choose to use to describe them, surely there is a choice there. Do we want to side with them, or do we make sure that we're siding with our European allies? And at the moment, I worry that we're cozying up too much to the US and this Trump administration, rather than you know keeping at a safe diplomatic distance. You can be diplomatic without. I mean, look at Macron. You know, I think that's a perfect example in diplomacy, right? You can call out Trump and what he's doing, and make it clear that you don't agree with him and that you won't make excuses for him, whilst also being diplomatic. And that isn't what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's just such a big risk continuing this relationship. And what's also further frustrating is that when it comes to, again, diplomatic hat on. Obviously, if we just then pushed away America, then you've got the risk of who are they also then going to team up with, right? We've got the three big powers in the world. Obviously, we've got people like Russia, right, who are obviously committing multiple war crimes. They occupy territories in three different European countries. They've done terrible crimes in Syria and are continuing to do awful crimes in Africa. We've got the Chinese, who obviously they've got the whole surveillance state thing as well. But they've also got the apparent Uyghur genocide that is happening over there, which is well documented, which again the Labour government voted on and said it was a genocide, and then changed their mind as soon as they got into power. So it's kind of like if smaller countries and unions feel like they have to cozy up to somebody for protection, who do you pick? Which is the worst of the bad bunch? And again, this is also the problem: is that if you then push away the US, what is that then going to lead to? Who are they going to team up with? So I get that there are a lot of things to balance here, and it's not about saying that we have to cut off the US. It's a case of we need to just shore up ourselves. It's about time Europe just takes care of ourselves.
The other issue that we have is that Trump is unpredictable. So, Starmer could sit down with him, have a conversation with him, agree on a number of different things, cozy up to him, invite him round for a state banquet and a state visit, and pull out all the stops to welcome him. And then 2 days later, he could be talking about how Scotland needs to be liberated from the UK and should be American because he's got Scottish heritage. Obviously I'm making that up, but it's the
Mm.
sort of absurdity that we've been seen. We've become sort of expecting of in what 5 weeks of this second Trump term, not to mention how unpredictable Elon Musk is, who appears to just be making decisions on his own as and when he likes, on behalf of everyone else, and Trump seems to just be going along with them. And I think we've got to be very, very careful what sort of relationship we build with this particular iteration of the United States government, because they could literally turn on a sixpence. And I understand the need for diplomacy, and I understand the desire to, keep your enemies close. But we if Trump has it the way that he wants with some of the things that he's spoken about, we could find ourselves in a situation where Commonwealth countries are being threatened with invasion from the US, and we have to make a decision. Are we standing with our Commonwealth and NATO allies, or are we standing with the US? And who are we going to choose? The special
Mhm.
relationship or the rest of the world?
And obviously, all we can do is hope that that doesn't happen. But the only way to, make sure that that doesn't happen is make sure that we do stand united. And when we're the UK and we're tiptoeing between different allies and trying to do both sides, I do get scared about which side we would actually fall on. I would like to think and hope, and I don't think it's naive to say this, that we would side with Europe because it's just simply
Hmm.
the most practical decision. But ultimately, this administration, this government that we have, are so completely unpredictable. They might just even stand back and let it happen and still try and do both sides. It's obviously just a really scary time. And again, what's also frustrating is that because of this predicament that we've been put in with the defense spending, which I want to come to more about now, is that it is true that because the US has spent so much on their military and protecting Europe and whatever else they get up to for many years, that many governments have seen that as a way to reduce their own military spending and obviously spend it in their own country. Not a bad idea, but obviously what that has allowed over the decades is for the US to get more influence over us, and they use that influence and they use it constantly. So obviously now, at our worst financial time, when countries all over Europe are absolutely struggling, we've got Germany and France, even the UK, struggling with balancing their budgets, that we now suddenly have to obviously cough up all this money. And what is again frustrating is that they have obviously cut the foreign aid budget. So let's talk about that specifically. I'm obviously not against, in the current situation, upping the defense budget. It makes sense. We're in this situation. Russia is a threat, and who knows what other threats are around the corner. But going after the foreign aid budget is literally disastrous. And I think it was Diane Abbott as well who was saying in Parliament that this is going to affect some of the most vulnerable people in the world. And when people are like, if somebody turns around and doesn't really follow politics, right, and they say, why are we sending billions abroad when we have people struggling in this country? That is a very fair question. And it's easily explained is that we fund programs abroad that help people like refugees who are in either still within their country but displaced, or they're in a neighboring country and displaced. That's the majority of refugees in this world and displaced people. And if we stopped funding the refugee camps, the education, the medicine, the food that they get while they're displaced, and waiting to go home, which all of them want to go home. Nobody wants to be a refugee. Nobody wants to be an asylum seeker. If we cut those programs, we're going to get more people coming to Europe seeking shelter. It's a good investment to help these people morally, but practically, the cost that it would cost if millions of people who are currently being held up by these programs suddenly got cut off. So we're just basically creating more problems in the future now.
Well, there's a second element to that as well, which is that often, what we send out in foreign aid also helps uh, prevent war, and it helps prevent fighting, and it helps prevent countries and people getting to the point where their countries descend into civil war and they all start killing each other. And I can't remember who it was that said this, and I'm butchering it anyway, but uh, there was someone that once said about this that if you cut foreign aid, then we're going to need to spend more on bullets. because
I'm not smiling at bullets. Sorry, I was just smiling at Becca's comments. I don't want to. I don't want to make it look like I'm smiling at bullets. just pointing that out.
Lewis has a lovely lamp. You do have a lovely lamp, Lewis. But yeah, so there's that thing there's that element of it to bear in mind as well, which is that if we, if we with the cuts to foreign aid, we are then potentially we're gonna have to spend more on defence anyway, because the likelihood of there being more war and more bloodshed is higher. But also, Trump's doing the same. So if the US is cutting foreign aid, if we're cutting foreign aid, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other countries that aren't, but for both of us to be cutting foreign aid, it's these vulnerable people elsewhere in the world are losing investment from both, from both sides of the pond. So it's probably just as well that we're investing it in defence, because we're probably going to need it.
Yeah, so I actually looked at the UNHCR. Oh God, United Nations Refugee. You know which one I'm talking about, and they get about $4 to $5 billion a year. About 43% of that comes from the US. That's gone. Also, on top of that, obviously the UK, I think we give about 300 or 400 million. We don't know exactly, obviously, what's getting cut yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if, obviously, if we are cutting part of that budget. And they spend $5 to $10 billion a year, depending on what surplus that they've got, and they can use that money way more effectively than we can. And then I was also reading again today, because obviously we use our foreign aid budget to obviously pay for people who are asylum seekers in this country, to put them in hotels and give them the services that they need while they're waiting for their asylum application to be processed. For some reason, in this country, it costs us sometimes 10 to 20 times more per asylum seeker than another country in Europe. And there's loads of weird factors that go into why it costs us so much in this country per refugee. And obviously, when I hear that, it's like, why are we spending that amount? But not to say that we shouldn't be spending it, but it's almost like we could be helping more people, because that's the
Yeah.
foreign aid budget. And again, it's frustrating because it's somehow we've got this inefficient spending. I do want to look into the reason why we spend so much on it a little bit more, but that's just an anecdote from earlier. But ultimately, as well, with the foreign aid budget, we prevent things from happening that we don't know didn't not happen. Does that make sense? Like, if we're funding medicines, if we're funding medical care, if we're funding education, refugee camps, all these types of amazing things all around the world, we don't know what that has prevented, but maybe we will now, with Trump obviously pulling $50 to $60 billion out of global aid, and obviously the UK now obviously pulling billions out of global aid too. These
Well,
are going to cause further
I
problems down the line.
I heard this morning that with part of Musk's cuts through the Department of Government Efficiency, or whatever, Doge, that they've inadvertently cut a load of spending around Ebola, and helping prevent Ebola. So that's great.
Yeah, in the
Um,
same week that they've just had their first death of measles in 10 years. So
Probably.
I don't want to laugh or smile. It's just like
It,
I'm literally like, it's almost like a laughing shock. Like, they have a measles outbreak right now, and they're cutting like programs that would help that. It's
how much
insane.
of the upgrade in defence spending do you think is a reaction to the uncertainty of what support we're going to get from America? Because obviously there's lots of talk about how it's due to rising tensions elsewhere in the world and so on, but the fact that we've got a Trump presidency and he seems to be aligning more with Russia, and what help and support he's likely to offer anyone is very up in the air. Like, surely this has played a part in that decision as well.
Yeah, obviously, a lot of people have been talking about this. Labour's manifesto did say 2.5%, but they were doing a whole commission, I think it was called, before, to see where they can save money and spend more money and what they need. But everybody knows, despite the fact that they're kind of still denying this, but everyone knows, is that they've suddenly done this in response to obviously what Trump is doing, what he's saying, and his complete unpredictability. And on top of that as well, he's calling for NATO allies to spend their required amounts, which obviously some are and some aren't, which is a fair conversation to have. But ultimately, He's now calling for 5%. So he's obviously just going to keep raising the bar just to try and continue bullying people. They only spend 3.4%. Why is he asking us for 5? And it just again continues to be frustrating. Another example of we're just going to continue to get bullied. And it is very well reported on that when he was last in power, he was very near, beyond threats, of pulling out of NATO. And obviously, pro NATO, anti NATO, whatever NATO arguments is a different situation. But obviously, regardless of what your opinion on NATO is, it would be
But
destabilizing. So
pulling
that
out of
also needs to be
NATO
addressed.
while cozying up to a dictator of a country that has, invaded a country neighboring NATO countries, is not particularly great, is it?
No, not
I,
at all.
I, I, I just feel, and I know I said this the other week, but I just feel like we're just beyond help at this point. I feel like I think you put it brilliantly in the chat, and I mentioned this when I was on with someone else last week. Where you said that what fucking timeline are we in now? I feel like we've just jumped into some sort of alternate universe where this has just become the norm, and I feel that way because everyone seems to just be accepting that this is it. Like there's no pushback, right, fair enough. Macron's got a bit of a smile and he's calling out the bullshit when it's happening, when he's in the room. And even Starmer to an extent, correcting the records today. But like they're not no one's calling it out. No one's saying, this is just nonsensical and is putting the world at risk. Bridget Phillipson was on the radio the other day and she was being asked whether or not Trump was wrong to say that Zelensky started the war with Russia. Well, of course, Trump was wrong to say that. Factually, that is not what happened. She was asked about 4 times and could not bring herself. Or the closest she could get was to say, "Well, the facts speak for themselves. The facts speak for themselves, and obviously, Russia started the war." And yeah, okay, but was Trump wrong to say that? And she wouldn't acknowledge it. And it goes back to the discussion we were having earlier about diplomacy. I get the need to be diplomatic, but when the president of the United States is going on record saying that that the leader of another country who we're regularly sending arms and support to allegedly started a war that they did not start, our government should be able to call that shit out. And it terrifies me that they're not willing to do that.
And it's just going to continue like this as well. Again, we're 5 weeks in, and it already feels like years. There is obviously just so much going on, and we will try and keep on top of it and highlight the more important stories to people, and just hope that we can somehow get get through these next few years without allies literally going to war with each other or further instability in Europe. But we will have to see. But let's do.
Just
Go ahead.
before we do, I'm just having a quick look at some of the live reporting from the press conference.
Ooh, let me have a
It
look.
seems like they're wrapping up, but excuse me. Starmer has said that we have called Trump a true friend in the Oval Office. A true friend. I wonder if he'll hold his hand like Theresa May did when she met up with him. There's been some talk about Trump has said that the whole extortion of Ukraine's minerals is is the basis for a more sustainable relationship with Ukraine, as opposed to the really terrible, awful, problematic relationship that the US have had with Ukraine over the last 4 years. Like what? He also talked, about dig, dig, dig. He used that again on the minerals deal.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying here as well. He's continuing the lie that the US are paying more. It is not true. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, the US has allocated 125 billion, where Europe as a whole and EU together has done 137 billion. I just obviously I could say, why does he keep lying? Well, let me introduce you to Donald Trump. But yeah, but Keir Starmer
and
has.
Starmer's. Oh,
I
go
was going to
on.
say, Keir Starmer said one thing at the conference saying that we can't give peace that rewards the aggressor, or that gives the encouragement to regimes like Iran. So I'm guessing he's kind of, I don't know, like leaning
Yeah,
into
but then
how
he
much
also said,
faith
sorry to
Iran.
interrupt you, Lewis, but then he also said you have created a moment of tremendous opportunity to reach a historic peace deal, and thanked him for his commitment to achieving peace in Ukraine. While he's accusing Zelensky of starting the war, having conversations behind Ukraine's back to try and come to a negotiation that they're not allowed to be part of, and while deciding all of a sudden that he's going to extort Ukraine for all of the mineral resources in order to get peace. Why the fuck should Ukraine have to give up their minerals in order to come up with a peace deal? They were invaded. Russia invaded them. Russia are the aggressors, not Ukraine. And I just find it a bit hypocritical when Starmer's sort of, on the one hand, talking about, let's be careful, and be careful of Iran and all these, we need to, make sure that we're not sort of cozying up to them. But then in the same time, he's saying, well done, you're doing a really good job, you really care about peace. When this guy is literally, it's like using the schoolboy bully thing. It's the kid that's just been battered by someone unprovoked, and he's gone up to that kid that's just been battered and basically said, "If you give me your lunch money, I'll ask the guy that battered you not to do it again." It's just, it's insane. We shouldn't even be entertaining that. Although
And
apparently even Macron did. Apparently Macron's quite happy to benefit from some of these mineral resources from Ukraine as well.
once there's money there, I'm sure the rest of Europe, especially the more elite Western powers, are happy to take their fill as well, because, well, that's just the history of what we've always done. I do want to move on to the next story, though. I'm a bit frustrated about this story because, personally, for me, I haven't seen it get as much attention as I think it needs. We constantly in this country, go on about corrupt politicians and corrupt this and corrupt that, two-tier Kia, all the things that the people on the right say in the far right reform voters. But when an actual story comes out showing possible corruption and politicians filling their pockets and doing unethical things, it doesn't get the attention that it needs. So campaigners are calling for an investigation into Lord Evans of Watford over potential breaches of House of Lords rules after a Guardian report uncovered and exposed his involvement in a cash for access scheme. Evans was recorded offering introductions to ministers in exchange for sponsorship of a parliamentary event run by his son's company, in which he holds a stake. Evans denied any wrongdoing, of course he did, insisting he received no personal benefit, but when transparency groups argue his actions could undermine trust in Parliament, urging the Lords and Commissioners for standards to investigate him. But Lady Angela Smith, the Lords leader, stated that if Evans broke the rules, he should be expelled. But this case highlights again broader concerns over lobbying and financial influence in the Lords, with calls for stricter regulations. And then the leader of the House of Lords has been urged to then back calls for those tighter restrictions on peers for being paid to offer political advice. And then the Guardian did like 5 articles this week, all related to things around the House of Lords, which then showed that 1 in 10 people in the House of Lords have had roles where they give political advice and policy advice. They're in the House of Lords. They're already filling their pockets. They're already unelected, and now they're using their positions to continue to fill their pockets. It's unethical, and it should stop. But again, why isn't an actual story about possible corruption on quite a wide level just not being covered? Why are we always angry at the wrong things? Callum, what do you think?
Lord Evans, is he a cross-party peer, or is he
He's Labour.
is Labour? Well, that's your answer to your question, then, isn't it? That's why it's not been talked about, because he's a lord for the party in government. If he was a Conservative Lord, I'm sure Labour will be talking about it. Or if this had happened when the Conservatives were in government, everyone would have been talking about it. But he's a Labour Party peer. The whole House of Lords system is corrupt. The House of Lords needs to be abolished. It needs to be replaced with an elected second chamber that can, still scrutinise government policy, still play a part in our democracy, but with a chamber of people who are actually elected rather than people that are political appointments, bishops in the church, or happen to be born from the son of somebody who's born from the son of somebody who was born from the son of somebody who was born from the son of somebody who happens to be the great great grandson of somebody else who was once appointed to the House of Lords. The whole makeup of the House of Lords is undemocratic. So I am not surprised at all that people that work within an undemocratic, corrupt part of our democratic system. I see the irony in the statement I've just made there, thinking it's okay to be more corrupt than they already are. I mean, we've heard stories for years, haven't we, about lords rocking up and signing in at first thing in the morning in order to get paid for the day, and then they just go and sit in the Parliament bar all day and don't actually do any work, but they still get paid because they signed in, right? So cash for access. Are we surprised?
A lot of people in the political sphere will actually say that, despite that it's undemocratic and blah, 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 is that it functions well, as in, like, they do good scrutiny. But
But
even
it
if
could
that
function well if they were elected, right? It could still have the same
exactly, yeah.
function.
But exactly, that's the point that I want to make, is that it doesn't still make it right, and you can still have systems in place like citizens' assemblies, and you can get expert panels in when you need them. Because obviously, the idea with the House of Lords is that, like, oh, you've done charity work for children for 20 years, 30 years, great, you can be a lord and you can help now, legislate towards that. It sounds good on paper, but ultimately, we need a second house, and we need checks and balances. We need more separation of powers. Obviously, in light of the history of the world of the last few hundred years, we can create a really good system that doesn't get clogged up, where they're not fighting with each other, where they're almost like forced to work together. We've got enough examples now of how different constitutions and democratic systems and electoral systems around the world have worked and failed. So we've got an opportunity to do this. And just remember as well, it was Keir Starmer 2 or 3 years ago who did an entire press conference about wanting to completely get rid of the House of Lords. And obviously, what's happened is that they've got into power and realized that if they did that, especially with how unpopular they are, is that if they launched a new house, that it would probably be taken over by a party that is not aligned with them. So again, it's just the same old things. It's like if if Reform actually ever came into power, like, do people actually believe that they would bring in PR? I actually believe the Greens would do it. I don't believe Reform would do it. I really, really don't. Why, if they got elected in at 35%, what incentive do they have to change a system where for them to get re-elected, they would then need to get 50%?
Yeah,
It just wouldn't
it's not.
happen.
It's not going to happen. It's not.
Uh, and yeah, like as you mentioned as well, we've still got peers who inherit their position. It's not many, but they're still there and they need to go. We've got 23-ish, 25 bishops all around the UK, who, by the way, when we actually visited the House of Lords recently, but by the way, guys, me and Callum sat in the House of Lords just for 10 minutes just to see what was going on. And we saw bishops. If I remember correctly, Callum, it was the Bishop of Manchester who was
It
giving a
was.
speech about, I think it was like Holocaust remembrance. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
it was.
great. It's good that he's up there talking about these things, but
But
ultimately,
but
I want an
the thing
elected
is,
person in there, not a bloody bishop.
exactly. And I remember I spoke to Natalie Bennett about this Green Party peer in the House of Lords back in Green Party conference last year, and she was talking about it, and she said, "Look, she said all these bishops. She said some of them are lovely. She said she can sit and have wonderful conversations with them, but why are they there? Like, what happens to
Why
separation
are you
between
here?
church and state? But seriously, like, what like we're supposed to be, we're supposed to have separation between church and state, right? So why have we got a load of not that we shouldn't have people from different religions, but why have we got religious leaders automatically
Do you
getting
remember
in
what?
based on the fact that they're religious leaders? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's
Do you remember what?
very outdated.
Do you remember what Carla said to us when I was asking her questions around, things that you would change or didn't expect? I can't remember which question it was, but
No, but
she
you can
enjoyed.
find out on Sunday by watching the full interview here on Turn Left.
Yes. Oh, by the way, like if obviously anybody hasn't seen, because one a clip has been released. We interviewed Carla Denia recently, and there's a clip out, and the full thing will be coming out very shortly, so you can watch it all there. But
Yeah,
when I was asking but when I was asking her questions, the one thing that she brought up is that, like, she let us know that before PMQs, essentially, if you want a good seat, you've got to get there like half an hour, 45 minutes early, because there's all this ceremony going on, and you have to do all these prayers, and it's
and
like
you've
it's
got
a
to
big
get in first thing in the morning to reserve your seat as well with the prayer cards, like right
yeah.
first thing.
It's a
Yeah.
big waste of time. They spend like an hour of prompt for 20 minutes of PMQs. It's absolutely stupid and ridiculous. Like these politicians, these MPs, as Carla said, could be doing better things. Parliament's inefficient, and obviously, I know we're talking about the Commons right now, but all of it, it needs to be overhauled. Honestly, I'd love to get into the conversation about how I think we need an entirely new constitution and way of life in this country, but that would bring me on to a half an hour rant. But yeah, again, part of the reason why I chose this story, not just because it is important, but also from the angle of why is it that the Guardian have released literally like a series of 5 or 6 articles related to just the entire scandal, individuals, and loads of other accusations that have come out, and it's just not getting attention. People aren't angry at it. And again, big rant. Why is it that people are constantly going on about the 4 or 5 billion that we're spending through foreign aid to help asylum seekers, but then they're forgetting about the literal billions that the Tories gave away to their friends during the pandemic? I get frustrated when people are allowed to talk about where their tax goes, but why is it when I think we should be talking about the right stories, people are getting angry at all of the wrong ones? And that's
There
what
is
frustrates me.
there is an issue, and actually, for and I won't out anyone here, but for a number of us at Turn Left, certainly for me, the first I heard of this story was when you broke it to us this afternoon in the chat to say, "Oh, this is what we're covering tonight," and I was like,
Came out
"What?"
like 2 or 3 days ago as well.
Yeah, I was like, "I've not heard about this," and I know a number of others also hadn't heard about it, and and we consume this stuff. Do you know what I mean? So if we're not hearing about it when we're consuming it, and we're looking for these sorts of stories, then your average Joe Bloggs isn't going to have heard about it.
Mm.
But I do think it smacks of. I don't want to say cover up, because I think that term's used an awful lot at the moment for things that are just simply people not knowing what's going on. But it is interesting, isn't it, how this sort of behaviour happens, and even with the Guardian publishing a number of articles and deep dives into this, no other media outlets seem to be picking it up, or if they are, it's not being picked up on a grander scale. I'm surprised. To be honest, I'm surprised that the right wing haven't picked up on it. I'm surprised that Reform aren't talking about it. But of course, would they get rid of the House of Lords?
But also as well, like I'm gonna be controversial, guys. I'm gonna defend establishment media here for a second, because if you think about this and just take a step back for a second, is that I can criticize the Guardian for many things and I can praise them for many things. They have spent hours upon hours, multiple people, so much manpower going into this investigation, and it's just fallen completely flat. So the question now leads on to, is this why we have a problem with the media? It's not even necessarily just them, it's also us as well. Because if the Guardian have put all this manpower into it, and then they see that they haven't had that much impressions, that people haven't read the article, that nobody else is talking about it, why would their bosses then turn around and say that the next time this happens, they're not going to get the manpower for it? And then they're going to follow the stories that they're incentivized to do. That's going to get attention. So it's almost like defending the media, but then attacking us as a population as well, because we're not paying attention to the right things, and that therefore then shapes the media attention as well.
In fairness to the Guardian and everyone else that hasn't commented on it, though, like it has been a Becca, it has been a pretty not that every week isn't a busy news week, as you always point out when you come on to present these shows, but like it has been a pretty busy news week. Like there's been a lot going on, particularly internationally.
Has there?
Well, has there not?
I'm joking. I'm
You know,
joking.
so I wonder if it's that. Maybe if we hadn't had the Trump visit coming up, and sort of the other things maybe hadn't happened, then perhaps it would have got more coverage. Although saying that, Radio 2 this afternoon, listening to what's his face? Oh, what's his name? He cycles everywhere and puts videos on of motorists being idiots.
Is it Cycling Mikey?
No,
Is
it's not. It's the guy. It's the presenter on. He has his own show. Jeremy
Oh,
Vine. That's who I'm
I thought
thinking
you were
of.
talking about the Cycling Mikey guy. Which, if
No,
anybody
he
who
does that too.
Yeah. I love him so
I do
much
like Cycling
because
Mikey.
he's such a twat that he's like committed to being the twat. And like I know there is like a backstory about somebody in his family obviously was involved in an accident, but at the same time, the content that he produces,
Yeah, but when
I
people are
love.
driving the wrong way down a road to try and cut a queue of traffic, like, he's
I
right
just
to
love his
stand there and be a
commitment
cunt
to it.
about it, right?
I just love his commitment to it.
Um,
Has anybody else seen this? I wonder in the comments. Cycling Mikey, I think that's his
They
name.
might have done. But anyway,
Sorry, yeah.
back to the conversation. No, it's Jeremy Vine I was thinking of. Jeremy Vine, one of the conversations Jeremy Vine was having today was about miners' wives being, the ghosts of miners' wives being seen on Ring doorbells, which, if I remember rightly, was a video that went viral about a week ago. So, if Jeremy Vine's got time to talk about possible ghosts on doorbells whilst trying to cover, when he would normally be covering more interesting political topics, then maybe it's not been as busy a news week as I thought it has. But, hey ho.
Sorry, I was just double checking as well to see if there's been any more crazy updates from the US because there was 20 new updates on the feed. Okay, so we're going to come to comments in a section. In a section. In the next
There
section.
will be a section.
So if anybody wants to put anything in there now, please go ahead. Our lovely producer in the background will be getting them ready. But just remember, if you haven't already, then make sure you like the stream, do all the usual stuff as it helps with the algorithm. And obviously, if you want to see us grow, then you can donate to us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can support us either monthly or maybe a one-off donation and help us try and become a full-time media organization. I will say we've had some obviously good months. We're making money through TikTok as well, not loads, but it's helping. And we've used a lot of the donations that we've received over the last few months to help people with people's equipment, to help with people's travel. So thank you very much, and we really appreciate it.
And it's paid for us to be able to do things like the interview with Carla Denyer as well, which helps massively. The more interviews we can get with higher profile political figures, the more seriously we're taken as a media organisation by other people in the political landscape, and it helps us get access to more individuals and more interesting people, which means that we can produce even more interesting and worthy content for you guys too. So thank you for supporting, and please keep it up if you can.
Right, let's go to comments. Did we set the comments section, Tyler? We
Yes,
did.
we did.
Perfect. That was probably when I stepped away.
Yeah, we left my curtains in though, but that's fine.
Is our
Oh,
producer coming on camera? Not on camera, on the microphone today.
She's
yeah, can you
here.
hear me? Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Hi,
We
Sarah.
can. Hi,
It's Sarah.
Sarah.
Hi, it's Sarah. Yes, it's me. How are
Sarah,
we? It's been such a great show so
could you
far.
put your microphone end slightly closer to your mouth, please?
Okay, sorry. Is
Oh,
that better?
perfect. Oh, the clarity. The clarity.
It's almost as
Yeah.
if she's not using the one that we've used some money to get
Oh
for
my
her,
God,
isn't it?
guys, I am trying. I'm so bad when it comes to change. I'm horrific. And then when it took me such a long time to even change my laptop, but I did do it. I did. I caved in, caved in. But it's so good to be here, and the comments have been really, really great. So let's start off with Tracy's comment, where she said, was going back to the Starmer story that you did initially, Lewis. Appeasing a fascist is disgusting, and actually, you guys really, really tapped on the fact that Starmer's visit is essentially just a lesson in diplomatic flattery. Essentially, like it's quite ironic that Starmer initially criticised Trump's endorsement of Boris Johnson and called it a sign of everything wrong with politics. And now in the 2025 that we are in at the moment, Starmer's now rolling out the red carpet for Trump. And I think it's a bit of a dramatic shift. So has Starmer kind of abandoned his principles for political convenience, do you think?
I think like one question that I have when it
Yes.
comes to this is that, people raise this idea that, if we open up trade relations and have closer relationships with countries like Russia, let's build some gas pipelines. If we open up China to the world and let them come into the World Trade Organization, and of course, if they're integrating into the world, they're going to become a really amazing state who's going to be our friend. And obviously, a lot of these things haven't turned out to be true. So my question is there like a PhD person out there or someone who's wrote a book about the history of trying to go through this method of getting closer and opening up to a fascist country or a country that's run by dictators or authoritarians, does it actually work? Does it work, or is it always going to harm us in the end?
Absolutely.
Or does
I'd like to know the answer to that question.
it work on a personal level? The guy's a narcissist.
Yeah,
Do you beat narcissists by appeasing them and feeding their ego? I don't
exactly.
think you do.
I don't think you do either, and I think, and it's what's interesting is that what's coming out of the stories at the moment is that Trump called Starmer a very tough negotiator, which I find
I saw
hilarious.
that.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, on the surface that might seem like a bit of a compliment, but given Trump's history of using flattery as some sort of like strategic tool, I think it kind of warrants a deeper like look into it. What I'm interested in is if Starmer was actually a tough negotiator, I think that he would have pushed back harder on Trump on issues like Ukraine or trade tariffs, or Trump's essentially his retreat from global like commitment, and instead the visit kind of ended sorry, my speech today is terrible, ended with like little in the way of like solid agreements, and the UK's position I think kind of remains as uncertain as ever. I think a genuinely tough negotiator would have challenged Trump's unpredictability rather than carefully sidestepping potential conflict. But I guess this is like a first meet, so maybe it's like, oh, let's play nice. But I think by accepting that label at face value, like Starmer risks looking complicit in a PR exercise rather than a serious diplomatic engagement. But I don't know what you guys think.
I'm just reading that Robert Peston has asked Trump, will he apologize for calling Zelensky a dictator? And um, Trump says, "Oh, we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow."
Ugh.
Like, yeah, because Zelensky's coming to the US to basically sign away all the mineral resources from Ukraine in order to.
Oh my god! Sorry, I'm so sorry. Like looking at, did you see the Canada bit? So
No, what was that?
No, what
so
happened?
so like somebody asked the question. Oh, did you discuss Trump's plan to annex Canada? What does the king make of that? And then Starmer said, "Oh, like basically, why are you trying to divide us?" Like he literally said. So Starmer says he has a good, productive meeting with Trump on Canada. He accuses the questioner of trying to
Goodness
find a
me.
divide between us that does not exist. Are you
Oh
kidding
my
me?
God.
He's literally made multiple jokes per week. We had the hot mic from Justin Trudeau like 2 weeks ago where he was at a meeting and he was like, he's serious. Like, he is serious about this.
That's
The thing is
shocking.
the Canadian people as well, like, know how seriously the Canadian government are taking this. They are talking about the fact. I saw somebody, I think it was a TikTok recently, of somebody talking about the fact that Americans don't quite seem to understand just how serious this is, the whole situation with Canada, because Canada is serious. Like, they will fight. They will do everything they have to do in order to protect their country. So yeah, to hear that Starmer's just sort of, throwing it out the way as if, oh, you're just trying to divide us by asking a question like that, is just shocking. Thank you for the
Mm.
donation,
Yeah, thank
Rachel.
you, Rachel.
I didn't
Um,
realize that there were elections today. Sorry, can you clarify, Rachel? Is this local elections or is this for a national thing? Does each state hold it at a different time? I'm really unfamiliar with the Canadian election system.
as am I, so I feel like I need some educating on that front. But I thought that was, I mean, I wanted to big up Rachel really quickly for gifting. But yeah, how the elections work in Canada, I think would be really interesting to find out. And whilst she tells us that, we can go on to Luna's comment about MAGA, trans women are the biggest threat to women and girls. Also MAGA, pardons January 6th convicted paedophiles. Also MAGA, harbours child sex traffickers. Oh, the bloody irony. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, these things that should be consistently being condoned, and then you have all of this political theatre happening at the moment, and this so-called quote unquote special relationship with the US that somehow still exists is so far from equal. Like,
Are
if Starmer
we?
truly wants to safeguard Britain's role on the world stage, and protect us, our welfare and European interests, I think he has to look beyond Washington and build stronger alliances in Europe before it's too bloody late. Condone the things that are happening in the US and stop being a, bit of a sidestepper. It's giving backup dancer for me. So yeah.
And again,
Are we
like I
coming
brought up
on?
this point, I was going to say, I
Uh,
brought up this point weeks ago, right? That Donald Trump has got more sexual assault allegations against him than there are trans athletes in college across the US. And again, this is all just constantly frustrating. Like the people that he pardoned on January 6th include white supremacists. I don't know if anybody really saw this because this didn't make too much news, but the white supremacist that he pardoned, who was the leader of the Proud Boys, because there was also the other group as well. I think his name's Enrico Taro or something like that. He went to the Capitol the other day and actually ran into one of the police officers that was there on the day, and he started taunting him. And it just literally, I'm tingling right now, even just saying it out loud. Like, think about that. Like, the officers, by the way, multiple officers in that building literally killed themselves within the months after that attack. And then for one of the leaders of that, who got over 20 years in jail, for him to be pardoned, and then to confront one of the officers that he helped arrange an attack on and taunt him, is just another level of just awfulness. And it just didn't even get that much news.
Are we coming on to the Tate brothers later? Because
Yes.
that. Okay, well, I won't go into it
You'll
then.
hold
But
off.
yeah,
we're
just
gonna talk
because
about
that's
Trump
another example where Trump has had where he's had his grubby little fingers in, that has obviously helped benefit people who have multiple allegations of human trafficking, sexual trafficking, and rape against them. And those are the guys that he's helping out. Yeah, he ran on a campaign to try and get rid of rapists from the country by clamping down on immigration, but he welcomes them in with open arms when their surname is Tate. But yeah, we'll come on to it. But also, just on the Trump bullying thing, did you guys see the way he spoke to the governor of Maine about the rules over transgender people in sports?
Yeah, I saw that, Claire.
Like where where he was like, oh, is Maine here? Is Maine here? And she's like, yeah, and he basically says, well, you better follow what we've introduced. You better follow it, because if not, we'll be pulling funding from you. We'll be pulling funding from your state. And she's like, I will be following the law in my state. And he's like, well, we are the law. We are the law. So you better do it. You better do it. Otherwise, there'll be consequences. It is schoolboy.
Don't forget the ending though, when she just went, "I'll see you in court."
I'll see you in court.
Yeah, I'll see you in court.
Yeah.
True.
But that's what happens. We've got a big baby in the White House, and you unlocked a memory that I'd harbored away somewhere in the back of my mind at the start of the show tonight, Lewis, about the big baby Trump balloon that we saw last time around, and I really hope it makes a reappearance this time. I really do, because it sums up Trump in one image. It's just perfect.
I'm going to make a prediction. I think if we're cozying up to Donald Trump so much that the government might pressure the Met Police to not allow it as like a health and safety thing. Mark my words. I'm making that prediction. You shouldn't make predictions,
What,
but I'm
to not
making
allow the balloon, you mean?
Yeah, because obviously it's a very sensitive time, and
Oh,
we've
it'll be
seen
there.
obviously the government and the Met Police being obviously getting worse towards worse is not a word, getting worse towards Palestinian protesters and ramping things up, which has received widespread condemnation from multiple international organizations. And I don't know, will they allow the big naked fat dummy of Trump to come out during that period? I don't know.
They might not have a say. It might just be there. Who knows?
We'll have to see. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, do we have any more comments?
Yeah, I do. So let's go to Jacqueline's comment. I have a feeling that before the US election, the Democrats felt that people would be so scared of the fascism that Trump and Musk would bring that they would swallow the neoliberal capitalism. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. But you guys did mention that video, and I just wanted to go back to it really quickly. Sorry, before I unpack this comment. I'm just so sickened that this is the world that we're living in at the moment. And I think it's every day that I have to remind myself that there are people who exist in this world that dehumanize those from marginalized or minoritized communities on a daily basis, and like the call to action when it comes to protecting trans people, minorities, black and brown people is just so imminent now than it is now more than ever. Refugees, asylum seekers, like the lot. So that's just all I wanted to say on that, because I'm sick and tired of seeing content like that really just pop up on my feed day in and day out, and people actually agree with it. But Jacqueline's comment. Yeah, probably Jacqueline. I mean, does anyone want to unpack that?
I agree with what she said. I mean, it's the problem that we've got here, isn't it? Where you've got, with Labour just assuming that, oh well, people aren't gonna vote reform because they're not very nice, so I'm sure we'll be fine. And it's like, no, you've pissed off people on the left, you've pissed off people on the right. People just aren't going to vote for you. And what Labour are doing now is exactly what the Dems did. What there's. We've always been, I feel like politically between us and America, we're doing this sort of race thing where sometimes they'll be a few years behind us, and then we'll be a few years behind them, and we're always sort of catching up and overlapping. We saw it with Brexit and then Trump, and I think that's exactly what's happening. They put all the money on the fact that nobody's going to vote for Trump again. Just like they put all the money on the fact the first time around, no one's going to, of course, Hillary Clinton's going to win. She's a woman. She's going to be the first female president. Of course she is. Of course Kamala Harris is going to win, because she's not Trump. And we saw what Trump did last time. Of course Brexit's not going to happen because it would be stupid. It's that same sort of just lack of. I think what it is, I think it's an issue about, I think it's an echo chamber issue. Is that a lot of the people that make campaign decisions and a lot of the people who are involved at the top of, and this is the case across, I would argue, every political party to a degree, is that you've got people basically running the show that are, they're like us, the political nerds. They follow this stuff day in, day out. They understand it sometimes better, sometimes not than other people, and they absorb themselves in this constantly. But the average person, they don't do that. And what the sort of political nerds like us often think that Joe Public are going to do is often the exact opposite of what Joe Public do, because they're not seeing things the way that we see it. They don't see Trump as this scary fascist dictator that's going to do all these terrible things. They see Trump as this guy who has rightfully spent the last 4 years, to some degree, calling out shit that the Dems had done, just like Reform are calling out shit that Labour are doing, and we can't argue against that because Labour are doing shit too, and a lot of the things that Farage accuses them of are things they are actually doing, like taking money away from pensioners that are going to freeze in the winter. And they're seeing Trump, say and do these things, and they're thinking, well, he's right. And he doesn't care what anybody thinks. He says it. He says what he believes, and he says it how it is. And all right, if some marginalised groups have to suffer at the end of it, then as long as I'm going to be better off, and Trump tells me I will be better off, then I'm going to vote for him over the party that have just done naff all for 4 years, haven't really helped, have arguably made things worse, or certainly my conditions are worse, and who, after going through a democratic process, decided to just stand the leader down, parachute in the vice president who nobody actually elected and voted for in order to be the candidate for president, and they think we're going to vote for them just because they're not Trump. Now, fuck that, we'll vote for the other guy. I do think there's an element of that.
Just to jump in quickly as well, because I want to make sure we get to the next story as well, is that obviously, in very simple terms, Labour have thought, we're going to get in, we're going to be organised, the Tories are terrible, we're going to front load the beginning of Parliament with all the hard decisions, and then everything's going to be fine, and we're going to have all the money that we need to win back over all the voters that we need to win back over. And obviously, as we've seen just from the last few weeks, you never know what's going to happen. So obviously that plan just goes out of the window. And this is the problem, that the risks that they're taking by capitulating to the right, by putting, immigration porn videos out there, by, cozying up to a fascist, which, by the way, all the polling says, like, the public do not want Trump to be cozied up to. They want Keir Starmer to stand up to him. And it's going to be risky. It's absolutely risky because it could lead to Reform getting into power because they think that because they're so competent that everything's just going to be fine in 3 or 4 years. They're going to be able to turn around and say, look, all the amazing things that we've done. But ultimately, they're just setting us up for so much failure. They're setting us up for these people to come into power. And who are people going to vote for? Because Nigel Farage has actually done a good job, almost like making a new image for himself, where he's just as bigoted as everybody else. He's not, he doesn't stand out anymore. Meaning, Nigel Farage was the person, the politician who was at one point the most crazy racist person who was completely intolerable that we had in the political establishment, and now he's no longer that. He is just one of many. So therefore, his party now looks more appealing. He's more careful with his words, where occasionally he will, be like, oh, yeah, we've got a Muslim problem in the UK, which obviously is an awful thing to say as it is, but he is more careful now and he knows what he's doing. And Labour are just falling into their own trap, and we could end up back in that situation where, like in the US, obviously different electoral system, where people just cannot bring themselves to vote for Labour and are not able to come together to keep the far right out of power, which is obviously terrifying.
There's always the thought, that there may not be an election in this country in 2029 because we may have a war government. So, we won't be able to vote for Arjun because...
Would you like Reform or would you like war? they're the choices. Which one?
Wow,
well, listen, if it's at least if it's a nuclear war, it will be over with quickly, and we won't have to suffer anymore.
Oh my God, guys! I don't even think.
No, sorry, that's depressing. Sorry,
I don't have an existential crisis.
Because of the time, do we have any more specific comments you want to highlight, or should we get on to the next story?
We can go. Can we just show? Oh, sorry, Tracy, you're the star today. I just really love your comments. There will never be a separation of church and state as long as we have a monarchy. And also, didn't Gordon Brown have a plan ready to go to reform the House of Lords and make it an elected assembly? And I think that is actually a true fact.
Yeah, but Starmer said he wanted to abolish the House of Lords.
Oh, Starmer's actually he's full of shit.
Well,
I'm tired of him. I'm sorry, I don't like Starmer. I really don't like Liberals. Don't make me rant. I can't do it, guys.
You're in the right place, Sarah.
I don't know why, but when I saw the name Gordon Brown, then my mind pictured Gordon Ramsay, and I got really confused for a second.
Scallops, where are they? Liberals, where are they?
What are you? I'm a stupid sandwich. What is it? Is that the famous?
I'm an
idiot sandwich.
That's
idiot
what the Liberals say
yeah.
when they
Anyway,
realise they fucked up.
But yeah, this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to get a reformed House of Lords. And the only way to get true separation of church and state is obviously, to get rid of the monarchy and the way it functions now, because our lovely head of state is ordained and blessed by God himself. And that's where he gets his power from.
Because he happens to be the son of somebody who was the daughter of somebody who was the son of somebody who was the son of somebody who was the son of somebody who was the daughter of somebody.
The baby that ever existed. Think about it.
It's like hereditary peers in the House of Lords all over again.
Jesus was a nepo baby. Okay. Anyway, we will have to get on to final story. We are going to end up going over, which obviously leans into a more serious issue.
Well, we started late anyway.
Right,
the Tate brothers. What was that?
Bye, Sarah. Thank you for your help.
Thanks, Sarah. Sorry, I kind of forgot that you weren't not going to be here now. Thank you, Sarah. Just brushing her aside. Thank you very much. Okay, right. I have to get back into serious mode because I hate talking about these people, but it does need to be spoken about, and I want to go for a particular angle with this story. But Andrew and Tristan Tate, who are facing human trafficking and other charges in Romania, have flown to the US after a travel ban was lifted. Romanian authorities approved their request to travel, and a court also lifted the seizure of some of their assets. But reports suggest that Trump and his US officials had urged Romania to allow their departure. Great, more interference. Andrew Tate, a former kickboxer and social media influencer, has been accused of promoting extreme misogyny. He and his brother were arrested in Romania in 2022 on those previous charges: human trafficking, rape, forming criminal gangs. And then in 2023, they were formally charged with the crimes involving 7 victims, which later expanded to include 35 alleged victims. And a Romanian court ruled in December 2023 that the case could not proceed due to some procedural issues. Now, the brothers are also wanted in the UK for alleged sexual aggression and are facing a civil case from 4 women, but they deny these allegations. Of course they do. But they remain under judicial supervision and must return to Romania in March. But their ties to Donald Trump have drawn so much speculation about political influence with their case, though, again, US officials are denying any involvement. A Romanian minister acknowledged that the case was actually discussed with a Trump envoy, but they dismissed claims of any external pressure. But the angle as well that I want to kind of go with this story is, instead of just being like, oh, they're horrible men, they're horrible people, which is obviously needs to be said and needs to be acknowledged. But I want to like take us back to the time of how is it that these men came to be, right? If we think about it, I remember, was it pandemic TikTok or just before the pandemic? And it was all these clips of this bald man who nobody really knew just saying all these insane things. But what happened when he said those insane things? It got hundreds of millions of views and likes, and every fucking podcaster across the world was begging him to come on to their podcast so they could get the likes, they could get the views, they could get the monetization from it. And they didn't care what harm that caused. But look what harm it caused. We have got teachers in this school, we've got teachers in this country who've had to hold sessions with like groups of young boys, students, to tell them that the things that they're repeating from Andrew Tate, more specifically than his brother, that what they're doing and saying is wrong, why it's wrong, why it's disgusting, why it's harmful. We have seen that the platforming of these men created people to go into a pipeline. They helped people get into the pipeline of the far right by, telling men this is how you be a man. But it's not even telling them how to be a man. It's saying if you don't do this, you're not a man. So it's almost different levels of psychology into this. And we've seen cases that are linked due to domestic abuse, and so many stories just over the last few years that are linked specifically to these men, to Andrew Tate, and the harm that they've caused. So I just want to say, I know we're a small show, and we don't get, millions of views, but if anybody sees this and sees anybody now platforming Andrew and Tristan Tate now that they're in the US, boycott that podcast. Do not watch it. Do not engage in that content, because that's exactly what they want. We know they're probably going to be on fucking Joe Rogan next week, but please do not engage in this content. Do not give them the time of day, because that is how these men got the power that they got, and managed to corrupt generations of children, and have caused damage for years and decades to come. Callum, thoughts?
Oh,
Just going to throw that at you.
Yeah, you mentioned school teachers. I just want to pick up on something I heard James O'Brien talking about on LBC this morning, which was that 90% of school teachers have said that they would benefit from some guidance in how to talk to young boys about issues of extreme misogyny, because this is such a massive problem in schools, and they are, in huge majority. I can't speak today. A majority of the time, in huge numbers, is what I'm trying to say. These young boys are quoting people like Andrew Tate for where they've heard these things, or almost to try and excuse their misogynist behavior. We've heard reports of school teachers being sexually harassed, and having other derogatory comments made towards them by boys as young as 11 and 12, and in some instances even at primary school age, for of comments that they've made that they've heard from the likes of Andrew Tate, or from, even if not from him directly, from other people who are repeating the sort of shit that he's been saying. And the fact that it seems that Trump's team have interfered with getting them out of Romania. There's also alleged victims here in the UK who currently have outstanding allegations of trafficking and rape against the Tate brothers as well here in the UK. So now there's a conversation as to whether or not they need to be extradited to the UK, but it's a bit of a problem because they've got dual citizenship. So I'm no lawyer, but I don't know what the sort of the logistics of extraditing someone who is a citizen of America to the UK when they're also a British citizen, in order to face charges over here, for something that they've alleged to have done. But I know that the lawyer on the legal team, whose surname is Jury, actually, which I thought was quite fitting, that he was talking today on the radio about it, about the fact that this isn't over as far as they're concerned. However, some people are concerned now that, well, that's it, because they're not going to go back to Romania in March, are they? What reason have they got to return to Romania in March to go to court? Because they're in the US. Romania, what are Romania going to do? Try and get them, like, Trump's not going to let the Romanian authorities bring them over there to face justice, is he?
Sorry,
So,
my
like,
cat's woken up. He's crying
it's
in
all
the
right.
hallway. Come on
So,
in.
like, is that it now? Do we just have to accept that these victims, allegedly, don't sue me, Tate brothers? Do we just have to accept now that these women are just, that's it? They're not going to get an opportunity now to see the
Well,
alleged perpetrators face justice.
yeah, like I'm going to come to that in a second. I'm just going to say, if Sarah, if you are available, like I'd love to hear, actually, if we can actually even switch back to the other screen to even hear your thoughts on this, because I know you are passionate about some of these topics, and I'd be interested to hear something from you about, let's try and use this moment to do something good, and how can we, help young boys who might express these comments, because I know that this is something that you've talked about before in the past. But just to quickly reply to what you said as well, Callum, is that obviously, yeah, if this goes to an extradition level, I don't know how that works through the legal system, but I'm sure, due to the fact that Donald Trump will probably be backing Andrew Tate, that there'll be some interference from the government, because it's just going to be another shit show.
I mean, he should be coming back, given he's started his own political party. Remember, the Bruv Party, and he claims he's going to be prime minister in 2029, which is great because he might take a few votes away from reform. But I mean, if he's gonna run a political party, and he's got any sort of serious idea about actually doing that, then presumably he's going to have to come back to the UK at some point anyway. But yeah, I just find the whole thing, it makes me feel sick that they were even allowed to leave Romania without going to court and facing the day in court in March.
I'll come to Sarah in 1 second as well, but I was just, if anybody listens to the Newsagents podcast, I was their intro is about this, and they did like a mashup of like things that he said, and the first thing he says is one of his quotes where he was encouraging people to sleep with people who are barely legal because they've been less used, and then the next clip was literally him talking about how you have to dominate your woman and own her. And it literally makes me feel sick to my stomach. But Sarah,
for the record, there are recordings of him admitting to raping women, and he has talked very openly about sexually trafficking women to go and work for him. But he has talked openly about sex trafficking. He has talked openly about the women that he has raped. So if he wants to sue me, then we can have that. We'll have that legal battle. You guys will have to pay my legal funds. But these are things that he's talked openly about doing as well. So they're not just sort of empty allegations from from women that want money. But Sarah, what are your thoughts on
that? Yeah, we've got two guys on the panel talking about this. Let's Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? And sorry to put you on the spot, but I just thinking.
No, it's fine. I mean, I don't mind speaking about Tate. I mean, I think everyone knows that I think Tate tries to market misogyny, and I think in light of what's happening at the moment in the UK, with the National Police Chiefs Council announcing that violence against women and girls is a national emergency, and then we've got this platforming of this misogynist, I think says a lot. Like, he's built an empire by selling this hyper masculine fantasy to young men, and I think it's just like his success, I think, tells us much about the rot at the heart of neoliberal society, as it does about the man himself. And I think we're already living in what is a capitalist system, and a capitalist system breeds isolation. Supplement that with his hatred for women and the misogynistic content that he puts out there. I think it's we need to respond to it, and we need to come up with some sort of solution. So I mean, his popularity doesn't exist in some sort of vacuum. I think it's rooted in deep structural misogyny that has festered in the UK and beyond that. And his rhetoric glorifies dominance over women and girls, treating them as these sexual commodities and these economic burdens. And I think it feeds directly into a wider culture of male entitlement, harassment and violence. And that's not me saying that all men are bad people, but his worldview, I think, kind of creates or acts as this pressure valve for male frustration under capitalism, where we're directing that frustration downwards towards women rather than upwards at the systems of power that are actually responsible for young men's alienation in society, their insecurity and their precarity almost. It's divide and rule politics with gender as the wedge. So we need to really, I think, come up with some solutions and proposals to kind of rebuild a community and collective spaces for young people when we've got teachers literally having conversations about how to breed respect in a classroom towards female teachers, then there's an issue. The UK is already under attack from reactionary forces, and I don't think enough is being done to really mitigate that at the moment.
I
Young
don't.
people kind of, yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
No, I
I
was
could
just
go
gonna
off
say,
on
I
a
don't know.
bloody
No,
rampage.
it's fine. Obviously, I'm just cautious of time as well. But one thing I want to touch on as well is like I don't know what happens in schools and what people are taught now. Um, and just thinking of like some of the most serious things that have happened in the world, right? When you are in high school, you learn about the atrocities of the Holocaust and what happened there. Is it too far to instead of? I remember when I was taught in school about how to treat people, especially when it came to like stuff like sex education. Obviously they talk about consent and they talk about just treating people fairly and nicely. But are we in a place now where we have to actually get a bit darker with these issues and actually like an appropriate age, like, even introduce people to victims? Because obviously there are people out there who are advocates, who are victims, who work for charities, who work for organizations, that they need to actually consume content through school in a supervised way, which actually shows people some victims instead of just promoting niceness. It's actually almost like showing the reality of it. Is that a bad idea? Is that a good idea? I don't know.
I mean, just on that as well, I've spent time working in schools doing theatre and education, in a number of different areas. Mental health, more sort of like English and literacy based things. But obviously, the famous one that a lot of people think of when they think of theatre and education is drugs and alcohol and knife crime. And we've already got organizations, whether it be theatre groups, whether it be police or paramedics or other sort of advocates, going into schools, talking to kids about why it's wrong to do drugs, about why you shouldn't get involved with knife crime, and the rest of it. So I don't think it's a stretch too far to have victims of domestic violence go in and talk about how extreme misogyny is a danger. I'm sure many parents would probably take an issue with it, but at the end of the day, if you've got teenage boys going into school making the likes of the sorts of comments that Andrew Tate makes on his platform to female teachers and to staff and to other girls, the same age, then maybe it is time that they start to see what
Yeah,
it leads to.
yeah. And not keeping it at this surface level, like we need to respect each other platitudes. Like I think we need to unpack these systems that produce the levels of violence, and harmful and hateful rhetoric that we're seeing at the moment, like the inequality and the misogyny. It's part. I think we need to unpack that because it's part of how the state neutralizes that sort of education. I think it's sort of like a surface level thing, and I think at the moment what we're not doing at the moment is recognizing. Violence against women and girls, or misogyny as a hate crime just yet. And I think it should be. It's on that level. It's reaching those heights. And I think, yeah, needing to recognize, understand, and dismantle the structures that perpetuate that inequality and vogue. Would have to include not just individual harm, but a real structural analysis around that too, and knowing that kids are capable of having those conversations. We're living in a very, very fast-paced world at the moment, and I think if we're not keeping up with how the toxic technoculture that we're living in at the moment proliferates this sort of reactionary rhetoric, then I don't think we're keeping up with the times. So keep up with the times, promote kindness, unpack these structural inequalities, and get the hell on with it. Like, I cannot stand Tate being at the forefront and for people to actually respect the things that he's saying. Like, fuck that.
I feel like as well, like I'll make a quick last comment and I'll have to go and I'll see if Callum you want to say anything else. But I know Trump's done a lot of terrible and bad things, but there is like a part of me where obviously Tate has managed to gain fame and notoriety, right, with lots of people, but it is still only a small group of people, but it's still enough to cause lots of damage. Is something like this, if he meets up with him in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, shakes his hand, takes pictures with him, is that going to be actually something that's going to make Trump more unpopular? I know, obviously, there's been times when he's had dinners at Mar-a-Lago with like Nick Fuentes, who is called a neo-Nazi, but obviously calling somebody a neo-Nazi for their rhetoric and actually, being a swastika armband wearing one is still a different thing because people, go with this idea of like, oh, it's just the media narrative, but people know what Tate said and people know what he stands for, and there's lots of concerned mothers out there who knows how bad this person is. So this is could this be a bad move for Trump? I
No,
don't
because
know.
they know what Trump
No.
stands for as well. They know that
Exactly.
Trump was liable for sexual battery via
They
forced
voted him in.
penetration.
They voted him
They
in.
know that Trump has multiple allegations of rape against him. They know that Trump has bragged
Exactly.
about going into changing rooms with young girls in beauty pageants getting undressed in front of him, and the fact that he's able to do it because he's the one who runs the beauty pageants. They already know that Trump is a man who talks openly about sexually assaulting women.
Mm.
So him meeting up with and shaking hands with another man who brags openly about doing exactly the same things,
Won't
I
harm
don't
him.
think it's going to make a difference. It's
No.
outrageous that it won't, but I don't think it will. I think the people that'll be angry about it will be people like us who already know what's going on, and I think everyone else will just be like, yeah, but you're just jealous because he's made a load of money. That's all. You're just jealous because he's a millionaire.
Mm.
It's important to obviously hold powerful people accountable, whether it's leaders, people in the media, and other people. His power lies in how much attention that he gets. So people need to make sure that obviously we're covering this now because it is important because of the damage that him being essentially freed can cause by him being platformed on shows and podcasts. But people need to make sure that we're not buying into the reactionary environment that they thrive off of, and they're going to continue saying and doing bad things. And I just hope that people don't give them the attention, which is currency. I just hope that people don't give them the attention for all the terrible things that they say, and that would essentially defeat them. But unfortunately, this is the environment that we're in. So I just encourage everybody not to add to it. I am going to end the show unless we've got any final comments.
Just on not adding to it, I think it's really important as well, particularly if you are somebody who has young men or teenage boys or even younger in their family, or if you've got friends who've got young boys and people of that age, to just sort of don't be frightened to sort of talk about these issues with people that obviously in a way that is getting to the crux of why it's problematic, and to ensure that they don't fall into this trap, because I think one of the big issues is that a lot of these young lads are consuming this content, and the family might not even realize that that's what's causing the problems. They'll see the effect that it has, but they won't necessarily have put two and two together and realize it's because they're consuming this content. So, talk to people in your circle as well, especially those with children, and just make sure that they're aware of the dangers of this too. Because of course, everyone watching tonight, we all, we already know about this stuff, because it's like what I was saying earlier about how we already follow politics, and we follow these issues closely, but a lot of people don't, and there are a lot of young lads that are watching this content whose parents are noticing that they are behaving inappropriately, but they don't realize where that pattern of behaviour is stemmed from. So making sure that you're educating people that you talk to as well is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll actually. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, just one final point, and I think this is where the concept of intersectionality really comes in. Like, the fact that misogyny is a weapon against class and race and gender all alike, and I think education is genuinely a tool for liberation when it comes to all of those things. So like you said, just continuing those conversations, unpacking those uncomfortable truths, confronting those uncomfortable truths, and holding these people who are the elites, who are in power, accountable, I think is the way forward. So yeah, completely agree.
And sorry to interrupt again. Can I just say, I wouldn't have normally addressed this comment, but just to Aidan, who said it's a consequence of wokeism. When you say men are worthless, second class, why are you surprised? Without getting into it, because you're just being a dick, I just want to point out the fact that if somebody's saying that men are worthless or second class, which I don't think is what wokeism is doing, but if saying that men are worthless and a second class, if you think that that means that it's okay to encourage people to sexually abuse and assault women, then you're the one with the problem. It's got fuck all to do with wokeism, because people can say really nasty things to you. People could say really nasty things about you, but that doesn't give you an excuse to go out and rape somebody. So if that's your line of thinking, then that says a hell of a lot more about you and your perceived masculinity than it does about anybody else. Sorry
You're
to
the
go
only
off at
one
one
that
on
said
somebody
that.
in the comments.
Yeah.
I'm
Well
going to
said.
end by actually just quickly highlighting this, and then we will end the show, I promise. So Jacqueline brought up about the Supreme Court judge, because obviously it's an awful situation, but I want to highlight a very powerful woman. Donald Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to be Supreme Court justice, and then if I remember the story correctly, a senator came forward and said, "I have a letter from a constituent who said that Brett Kavanaugh either sexually assaulted or raped, I can't remember what the terminology was, when we were younger." And this obviously caused a storm. It was all over the news. It was massive, massive television and massive, massive news. And eventually, this person, Christine Blasey or Blasey, I can't remember the exact pronunciation, took it upon herself to put herself on TV in front of literally hundreds of millions of people, to go out of her way to try and use her experience and what happened to her to try and make sure that this man didn't get into power. Ultimately, he still did, but we need to recognize that what that woman did was wonderful. It was amazing. I struggle with the word brave, and James O'Brien actually did point this out. Second mention of James O'Brien on this podcast, on the show. Curtis is not going to be happy, but he did a show after. The woman in France obviously got her husband sentenced away for the 70 men that raped her while she was drugged and sleeping. And he was saying he felt uncomfortable using the word brave, because you're almost insinuating if you don't come forward that you're not brave. And I thought that was an interesting take. But ultimately, I want to recognize Christine Blasey Ford for putting herself on a stand in front of hundreds of millions of people to try and use her voice and power to make sure this man did not get into power. And even though it didn't work, I still want to recognize the amazing thing that she did by putting herself in that position, because that bravery needs to be recognized.
Incredible courage. Agreed.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up, Jacqueline. We will end the show there. I know it's kind of like a sad up and down. This terrible thing happened, but but Christine did obviously a great thing by putting herself in that position and making herself so vulnerable. But we will end the show. So thank you to everyone who joined in, and thank you to Callum. Thank you to Sarah as well for being amazing guests and producers. But remember, if you haven't already, please like the stream. If you want to see us grow, then you can donate to us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. And you might be able to hear my cat crying in the background right now because he wants feeding. But you can support us monthly or a one-off donation and help us become a full-time media organization. So I am Lewis, and we will see you at the next show. So thank you very much.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.